So, thank you so much for having me here today to discuss my upcoming PhD research, which is due to start in October 2024. It's entitled Time Slicing Cemeteries, New Method for Understanding Iron Age Identity in Britain Before Rome, 400 BC to AD 43. So, the Iron Age, an often and unfairly overlooked period by those who claim it all started with Rome. Whilst there are no written sources from Iron Age Britons, the wealth of intricate and elaborate artefacts indicate communities closely linked by their natural environment, the animals around them, and crafting. From the elaborate chariot burials to the magnificent constructions of hill forts across the landscape, the Iron Age has so much to offer within its own regional and local complexities than just being pre-Roman. As a result of this lack of textual sources, many archaeologists in the 19th century and arguably early 20th century and onwards have looked to Roman classical texts to help explain these intriguing artifacts, as well as continental comparisons. These texts must be contextualized. Written through an imperious lens, depictions centre on Iron Age people as dangerous, warlike, and barbarians, when arguably these writings shine more light on Roman attitudes to those perceived as others, when a colonising empire pillaged lands, communities, and people. Artistic depictions, whilst improving their incorporation of the archaeological records in the 20th century, they still look to these texts and often also projected modern ideals of gender back onto the archaeological record. Whilst these depictions are incredibly captivating and demonstrate fantastic artistic skills, their representations of supposed hierarchical and patriarchal societies always appear to render men at the forefront of war, crafting, and the funerary process, while women of the Iron Age are presented in the domestic sphere, with their analyses focused on aspects of beauty and childbearing. So the burial of the Silly Warrior captures this gendered projection really quite well. When excavated in 1999, archaeologists were quite baffled by this individual who was buried with both a sword and a mirror, which is something that's never been seen before or since in Iron Age excavations. As archaeological preservation was so poor, as seen on the screen there, this dichotomy of gendered grave goods was focused in on, with archaeologists seeking comparative mirror burials, which were always with women, and sword burials, which were always with men, from across the whole of Britain. Whilst archaeologists ignored the potential for this burial to reflect potential female martial identities, many believe that the inclusion of the sword meant that the aptly named Silly Warrior must have been male. Until 2023, when historic England researchers using new scientific advancements determined with 96% probability that this individual was female. A wise tale of caution in projecting modern ideals of gender back onto the past. So, as a result of this, to investigate identities in the past, my research must seek to realise that identity or identities are formed through interpersonal connections across communities. Unpicking these complex relationships must be done through a data-led approach. Developing my methodology, I have taken inspiration from the fantastic work that has occurred in early medieval and Dutch prehistory studies. Sam Lucy's work on reinterpreting medieval cemeteries into kind of phases, Gerritsen's phase analysis of landscape use, and Mui's 2018 work that is so beautifully depicts the variations in early medieval burials that goes above textual descriptions ever can, in bringing us closer to the individuals of our past. The area that I'll be focusing on is East Yorkshire, where there's such a wealth of Iron Age burials that have been uncovered for over 200 years. Rather than focusing on the grand chariot burials as signifiers of elite identities, I think I showed one on my first slide. This research incorporates a wide variety of burial types and hopes to include them. So the aims of my project. The aims of the project is to develop a data-driven contextual methodology, hopefully refining our temporal understandings of identities and resultantly enhancing public knowledge of the Iron Age. This, a rough interpretation, visualises the objectives that I'll be taking. Stage 1 involves creating a large database of just over 1,000 burials, incorporating archaeological reports and grey literature from the archives, so I can then separate each burial into site, burial, and object. Stage 2.1 applies applying these object typologies, radiocarbon dating, and new aDNA analysis to give a loose chronological framework for interpretation. Stage 2.2 involves ArcGIS mapping, which is going to give me that visual way to portray the individual and collective cemetery origins, evolutions, and abandonments in tandem with each other. Stage 2.3 identity plots this phase burial data alongside aspects of identities that have been previously shown to be structure and principles, such as age, sex, and gender. A pilot study of this project was undertaken for my master's thesis, where I focused on two of the smaller cemetery sites in East Yorkshire, Rodston, Argham Lane, which is on the left, and Burton Fleming opposite Argham Lane, which is on the right. Here you can also see the influence of me's work on how I visualised each person buried at the site, which I think helps kind of bring us a little bit closer to the people that were actually inhumated in these cemeteries. To establish loose chronological phasing, I examined the brooches that were buried with the people. As these two cemeteries, the majority of the grave goods there were pretty much brooches. And I utilised the researchers like Hull and Hawkes, and more recently Sophia Adams' wonderful work on the chronological development of Iron Age brooches. So here's one of the many diagrams I made for it. Examining each individual grave, as well as use-wear analysis of each brooch and other artefacts, I was able to suggest the loose terminus postquem of the earliest point an object could have been deposited within a grave. From this, I was able to show how the cemeteries would have evolved over time, examining also the mobility of objects in a grave across time and its potential for representing how identities shifted, changed, or remained the same. Overall, at these two cemeteries, it does appear that aspects of identity impacted burial curation. In the case of age, which has been previously identified as a really important aspect of society in East Yorkshire, it was found to impact body positioning, with distinctions between the younger and older populations visible. Examining sex where possible, now as preservation in these two cemeteries were quite poor, this made it a little bit more difficult. A lot of them weren't able to be sexed, but where it was the case, I saw that it was influencing gravegood provision, but heavily intersected with age and the influence of that on society. Ceramic, sheep bones, and bracelets all seem to be associated with the female burials and brooches with males. Working at a larger scale in the PhD will help pull apart these intricate and complex multiple aspects of identities that I couldn't necessarily pull out of these two smaller sample sizes. Burial rites showed shared post-mortem treatments across sites, with brooch placement on the body varying across space and time, potentially reflecting their different functions as shroud fasteners or even just as kind of accessories, really. So as you can see in the two orange circles, the two cemeteries I focused on for my master's research was only a really small part of the wide variation in burials that East Yorkshire sites have to offer. It kind of just offers a small glimpse into identity across two communities. Increasing this scale and incorporating all of the East Yorkshire evidence will help pull out where if Iron Age communities were insular or sharing ideas, as well as the intricacies of gender expression and age-based rights. So that's my kind of whistle-stop tour of my upcoming PhD research, which I'll be starting in October 2024, part-time. Thank you so much for listening, and feel free to get in touch if you've got any questions or you'd like to chat about the Iron Age. That'd be cool. So yeah, thank you very much.